So the next speaker is Matthew Izzo. He is from a private practice in Australia and is going to tell about his experiences with fixed time artificial insemination and especially the resynchronization. Matthew, please go ahead.
Yep. Thank you very much for the introduction, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to thank the Scientific Committee for allowing me to present today, and my apologies to the translators if I tend to waffle in an Australian accent, but it's a vice of mine. So today I'm going to just outline a small-scale trial that I ran in conjunction with a number of people looking at the use of fixed-time AI and re-synchrony in a couple of the southern Australian dairy herds. So probably as an introductory statement that it's not something that's really out there to say that the detection of estrus has become increasingly more difficult in modern dairy farms. And when we think about the kind of animals that we're dealing with, it's not surprising. You know, we think about 40 years ago, we would have had a herd of about 20 animals producing a very small amount of milk, compared to today when we often have herds of up to 1,000, where you might have, you know, one labour unit looking after 250 animals, trying to find that actual animal on heat. And that animal's also producing, you know, some of these animals are making 14,000, 15,000 litres of milk in a year. It's just a very different animal. And so one of the steps that we have taken is to actually use fixed time AI, so the use of reproductive hormones, to try and improve this reproductive performance. And in effect, what we're trying to do is take out one of the chinks in the system, is to remove that heat detection side and basically use a timed approach. And if you look at the amount of work and study that's gone into fixed time stuff, I looked up OVSync on a database search and came up with 594 articles as of today. It's highly researched out there, and amongst that, more recently, there's been lots of resynchrony protocols, especially coming from the US. But when you look at it, it's actually very small amount has been done in pasture-based seasonal calving herds that are relatively common in Australia, and of course in Ireland and New Zealand. So the aim of our trial was to evaluate the fixed time AI with resynchrony in seasonal calving dairy herds. And then to compare those reproductive outcomes with some other mating plans, and to determine if we can achieve comparable conception rates using a novel and a commercially available intravaginal progesterone releasing device. So what did we do? We had two herds. One herd was a 475 cows, mixed breed herd. The other was a higher production Holstein herd. Our exclusion criteria was that cows on the day of enrolment had to be, so I should say greater than, so the exclusion criteria was that, so that the cows were greater than 30 days in milk were included in the trial. Anything that had a poor body condition score, and like obviously all around the world, no one can actually agree on a system. In Australia, we use 8, so just to throw a bit of thing into it. But anything under 3.5 out of 8 was excluded, and any evidence of reproductive abnormality, so specifically endometritis or illness around the time of thing. And what we did on the day of enrolment is we body condition scored them, performed an ultrasound reproductive exam of the tract, and then we blocked them by parity and cycling status and put them into 3 groups. So because I know there's a few North Americans here, pretty simple, just to explain a seasonal calving herd. We have a planned mating start date, and there's often a period of AI, and that can vary from herd to herd, 6 weeks to 9 weeks to 12 weeks, and then we'll often run a bull, and then we'll have a defined dry period, and then we'll calve and we'll go all over again. So everything's based on a mating start date, as opposed to a year round where we sort of have a rolling mating start date. So the 3 groups that we had group 1, which was our control herd, was estrus detection, and so it was an estrus detection followed by a non-cycling treatment at day 24, which is a relatively commonly one used in Australia. In group 2, which is our fixed time AI and resynchrony group, so these animals have had a fixed time AI at the start, and then an early pregnancy diagnosis performed at day 30, and anything that was empty was re-enrolled and inseminated. And the third group was just simply a fixed time AI followed by heat detection. And then once the AI period was finished, bulls are run with the herds. So just to show the three different groups here, so we've got the heat detection herd. So this is on the day of enrollment, day -10, we did nothing till they started mating. In group two, so the fixed time AI resync and the fixed time AI and heat detection had exactly the same ob-sync type program. The only main difference was in this group we used a 1 gram device, a DIB device, and in this group here we used a commonly commercial one, which is a C device, which is a higher progesterone device. And these animals were both fixed time on day 1. So here, just to show you grammatically what sort of happens here. So this is group 1. So on the heat detection days, heat detection starts on day 24. Anything that hasn't cycled was enrolled into a fixed time mating program, then bulls entered the herd, and then ultrasound was performed to identify the AI animals, and then a final one at the end. In the second group, you can see here, this was a fixed time AI re-synchrony group. We fixed time AI'd here, then a new device was inserted here, and so a synchrony program was begun here. Ultrasound performed on day 31, using day 1 as a start. And then anything that was empty was fixed time AI'd, and then bulls entered the herd. And in the group 3, you can see here that we did the fixed time AI at the start, heat detected, and then the bulls in herd, and again, pregnancy diagnosis occurred at the end. So the outcomes of interest here are, and these are commonly ones as John Morton sort of came up with them with the in-calf up to the 3-week submission rate, first cervix conception rate, 6-week in-calf rate, and the proportion of the cows that conceived. So relatively common ones that we use in Australia. Statistical-wise, yep, you can see it there, but I suppose the only thing that, originally we did have farm fitted as a random effect in our model, but after discussing with a few statisticians, decided that a fixed effect was better with 2 farms, apparently. I don't actually know that, but they told me that. So on the day of enrolment, the day of enrolment, as I said, so there was 226 cows in the heat detection group, 224 and 225, and we did actually have animals removed in the study that were actually moved for various reasons. So this is the sort of descriptive data, just to show you that we tried to, the things that we knew could affect fertility, we were trying to make sure they're even amongst the groups. So we had pretty even age distribution, body condition score was similar to all the groups, calving to mating start day interval, again similar, and CL status, which was our proxy for cycling animals. So we could see that we had for things that we were looking at there were very homogeneous groups. So here's some of the results here. So as expected, because of the fixed time AI, we had 100%, which is always good that we did that well. So in the 2 fixed time AI groups, 100% submission, whereas in this group here, in the heat detection only, we still got pretty high groups. So again, someone mentioned before about when you go to study a herd, they seem to pick up their game. This is quite actually a very good result considering the way that they manage their mating program. But we did see significantly higher with a 3-week submission rate. So looking at the first cervix conception rates, we did see similar amongst the 3 groups. And as I mentioned before, one of our objectives was to actually see if we could achieve similar conception rates between the 2 different devices. And we can see here that there was 51% in the DIB group and there 47.8% in the other group. And so we were in our trial we were achieving similar results there numerically. But the big thing to note, there was significant difference between farms, which that always has to be considered in these programs, that you will see this variation on a farm level. Another thing we looked at was a breakdown of the CL status, because one of the questions could be that if we lose the lower progesterone device, are we going to see an effect in animals that are non-cycling, so the CL absent? But we didn't achieve that, and numerically it's higher, but because of our numbers, we're not even close to getting statistical significance there. But I can say that we didn't see, there was no perceived difference in that with the lower device. Our 6-week in calf rates, although, you know, sort of they were not significantly different, but we did have a numerically higher one for the fixed time AI re-synchrony compared to our heat detection only group. So that's important to see. And we saw this with the breakdown of the CL status. Overall, we did not see a difference. There is a difference between the two herds. Obviously, animals that are cycling do get more in calf. But at the end of the trial, we didn't actually see a difference between the overall proportion pregnant, so we could see that we did achieve similar results there. I'll just skip over that one there. And I think this is a really good way to look at reproductive data, is using survival curves. And what you can see here is that one of the big bonuses of using fixed time AI is we actually decrease the median days to pregnancy of these animals. So you can see combined herds, we've got 50% pretty much by day one, where it took up to 28 days, and that has some significant reproductive and economic outcomes. And just to highlight the differences that can be achieved in herds, you can see in this herd we had very nice response to the first service conception rate. Hence, we did get those animals getting in calf quickly. In this other herd, we had a much lower conception rate to the fixed time AI, which then often resulted in the fact that we didn't see as big a difference in the mating start date to conception interval. So the key findings from this study here is that we did achieve similar first conception rates, 6-week in calf rates, and overall proportion pregnant in all three groups. And so what we say is we can actually use programs that have no heat detection to achieve similar outcomes. We did see similar conception rates between the fixed time AI groups, so between the two different devices. And using fixed time AI and re-synchrony, we were able to have a significantly lower median days to pregnancy, which does have these potential economic and future reproductive outcomes. And with that, I've gone over time, but thank you for listening, and just acknowledge the dairy producers, Boehringer Ingelheim, for sponsoring the study, and the veterans from Kyabram Vet Clinic who did all the hard work. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. The paper is open for discussions. Are there any questions?
Can't be doing from New Zealand. Just point of clarification, did you allow the herd owners to rebreed at the back end of that progesterone re-synchrony, or you excluded, there was no chance to rebreed?
So I probably didn't highlight that. I've done this before and not done the same thing. But yeah, that group 2, the fixed time AI re-synchrony, was no heat detection at all. Right. So it was basically, the animals were fixed time AI'd as per the program. So it was no heat detection in that group at all.
So but were any heats recorded at the back of that progesterone resync? I mean, or you didn't bother? You just
didn't bother. Bother. There was basically turned up and inseminated. So there was no actual recordings of heats, not at all.
So do you think you might have even got a better result with that if you had bred off that resync?
Potentially, the resync conception rate was actually 50%. So it was actually pretty, relative compared to what their normal heat detection one. It was actually quite high. So. I don't know whether we would have improved it much more than that. As I said, based on the fact that we did get a 50% resync over both herds, of course, variation between the herds, but yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Matthew.